on with business at hand. Mr. Lockhart won't be with us for this meeting, so I think that was mentioned. And with that, I'll ask Fiscal Officer call roll.
Mr. Stevens?
Here.
Mr. Camp?
Here.
Attorney Matthews?
Here.
Chief Brown?
Here.
Chief Stewart?
Here.
Mr. Sims?
Here.
Mr. Malito?
Here.
Mrs. Simon? Here. Mrs. Luckman?
Thank you. We have been issued the minutes of the March 11 work session with the road department on equipment purchases. Any additions or corrections?
No, sir.
Hearing none, I'll make a motion that we accept the road equipment purchase work session minutes as presented. Do we have a second?
Second.
Call roll?
Mr. Camp?
Yes.
Mr. Stevens?
Yes. Also issued the minutes of the regular March 11th meeting. Any additions or corrections on those?
On that one, I think the truck, do we have to make, we had on there, we had the purchases or the financing by somebody else?
I don't think it was in the,
I thought I
it wasn't in the resolution.
Oh, okay, I thought I
Yeah,
read it
because I
in the
thought we were
minutes.
gonna have to amend it also, but,
Do we have to amend that? or
No. no, because it wasn't in the resolution. I have a resolution
Oh,
for
okay,
the financing now.
yeah, because it said through the municipal finance program, so we.
Oh, it said through the municipal?
Yeah, on
Okay,
here.
yeah, then we do need to amend it.
So it would be page 9 at the bottom. So I don't know how we do this. but-
Third paragraph
just-
up.
I don't know who it was through a bank thing, right?
It was for the municipal finance program, and we're gonna amend it to be through Huntington National Bank.
Which bank?
Huntington?
Oh, that's what you said that before.
But it's not in the resolution.
No, but it's in the minutes.
What was that?
Okay, so the resolution doesn't need amended, we just need to
Make a resolution.
Yeah.
correct the minutes.
Yes, yes.
So what do we need to put in here now?
That it'll be through Huntington National Bank.
Okay, so that's page 12, 9 of 12, and the third line up from the bottom.
Right.
Needs to be amended to have Huntington. Okay.
So you want me to actually change the minutes?
No, because we did say that.
We
Wait, we're gonna,
help there, Mr. Matthews. What do we need to do here?
we just need to say we're not gonna use municipal finance
Because we never
and
made
go
a
to
resolution.
Huntington, use Huntington instead.
Okay, so you're just amending it?
It wasn't in the resolution per se, it was in the discussion.
Okay, so you want to specify it in the minutes today is all?
Yes.
Yeah. So leave your other minutes alone and just specify the
Oh.
amendment today.
Okay.
There we go. Thank you, sir.
I have nothing then for that.
But no, thank you for pointing that out.
I just wanted to catch that before somebody said.
No, that's a question that you needed answered. So having the discussion there, and not needing to amend the paragraph, we have a motion to accept the minutes as presented.
Yes, sir.
And I'll second that. Call roll?
Mr. Stevens?
Yes.
Mr. Camp?
Yeah.
Thank you for that clarification,
Yeah, I
Jim,
wasn't sure.
and thanks for pointing that out, Les. Okay, financials.
Okay, total pending warrants were $182,164.14.
Okay, and Mr. Camp and I have had an opportunity to sign and review those. Any questions on the warrants?
No, sir.
I have none. I'll move that we okay the warrants as in the amount presented by fiscal officer. Do we have a second?
Second.
Call roll?
Mr. Camp?
Yeah.
Mr. Stevens?
Yes. Balance and receipts?
Okay, total receipts and balances were $2,878,823.18. Expenditures of $182,164.14, with an ending balance of $2,696,659.04.
Questions or comments on balance and receipts?
None, sir.
I have none. Do we have a motion to approve as presented?
I'll make a motion to approve as presented.
And I will second that. Call roll?
Mr. Stevens?
Yes.
Mr. Camp?
Yes.
And now, we have a resolution to do our financing through Huntington National Bank in the amount of $250,000.
Okay, and that financing is for the purchase of
The 2019 Western Star chassis 4700 SB single axle ISL 330 HP with disc brakes, Henderson package A.
Any questions on that?
Mhm.
Okay, I will make that motion then to enter that
Resolution.
financial with Huntington. We have a second?
Second,
Call roll?
Mr. Camp?
yes.
Mr. Stevens?
Yes.
And you've already signed that.
Oh, okay.
I think, Mr. Camp should
Oh,
sign it right
need a
there.
second signature?
Mhm.
Here, since you okayed it?
Underneath,
Sign it.
Yes,
right
sir.
there.
That way, if Sims can't pay for them, you're next in line. I like that.
Okay.
Oh,
Additional financial.
that is it for financials.
Correspondence.
There is no correspondence.
Nobody wants to correspond with us, huh? Well, that's a good time, maybe. Okay, we get into trustee reports. Mr. Sims and I went out and looked at a couple projects he's got in mind that need to be taken care of, so I'll let him talk about those when the road department segment comes up if he chooses. So I did have a resident that called me about a tree that was in power lines that was dead on some property. So I directed them to the gentleman, Chris, from Ohio Edison, who was here ironically last meeting. And Chris got back to me, got up to the resident, explained out to the resident what Ohio Edison would do and could do, and then give the resident a name and some direction on possibly a tree removal company. The guy was concerned because of the storms that were coming in and the tree being dead. Now, it wasn't on his property, it was on the neighbor's, so they went through and, are you the neighbor, sir?
Yes, sir.
Well, hey, how did that work out? We might as well tackle that puppy while you're here.
Okay, I will.
You can come up and address the board here.
I'll just stand up from here if that's all right.
Well, give your name and address, that way,
Okay.
our,
I signed your book, Thurs. It's in the book there. Ron Harnack.
okay, Ron.
What's happened since I talked to you? Nothing. I'll just explain. The house next door is a rental house. There's a dead pine on each corner of that house. It's about a 50-foot high pine. I'm 25 feet away from that. My cars are there, my garage is there, my family room is there, my electrical is there. The electrical for that house runs right through the trees on the north side. On the south side, the identical pine to it, and they've both been dead for probably at least 10 years. And somebody stripped the bark around about 5 feet up, all around it. I guess it was to kill it finally. But during that high wind, the extremely high wind on that weekend, the one on the south side luckily fell between that house and the house next door. And it's still laying there. The woman that lives there, I went and talked to her and she says, I am so worried. I have 4 kids, 2 dogs, me and my husband, and that other tree's gonna go because they're dead. I mean, there hasn't been any green on the tree for probably 15 years. So I examined what my rights were, and I guess I don't have any rights because Edison came out and said, well, if there's a problem with the electrical, we can advise the owner. The owner lives 4 houses down on the other side of the street. I live next to that. I've lived there for 22 years. I've known that guy and fellow. I don't want to cast aspersions on his character. But let's put it this way. If you went by that house and you looked understand exactly what I'm worried about. I'm worried about that tree falling down, because the other one had a ball this big, and it just rolled out, and luckily it didn't hit that woman's house. She was in the backyard at the time. I seen the kids playing in the front yard, and I say to myself, wow, what are we waiting for? And there's nothing I can do. I've dealt with that landlord before, not always the best result, but I went down and saw him because he has these soft maples. He had a soft maple with 5 different trunks that went up right almost on the property line. I had probably about an 18-inch diameter branch over my house. I went out and talked to him. I said, what are you gonna do about it? He says, nothing. He said, but I'll give you permission to go on my property and pay for it. So I got Jim from down there by occasions to come up and give me a price. He'd done all my trimming before. Wow, he stuck it to me, $400 to take down a branch. And I said, okay, I learned a lesson. This time, my attorney said, why don't you just offer to pay for it then? I said, no, I'm not gonna get involved in that again, because if I take that tree down, even at a bargain rate, next thing you know, he's gonna say, well, are you gonna cart it away? The one on the other side is still laying there, hasn't done a thing in the last month since it fell. And this one is exactly the same shape, except this one is next to my house. And I don't feel responsible for paying for it. I don't feel responsible for carting it away. I mean, if it falls on my house, I have a $500 deductible. Now, sure, they might subrogate against the other company or him, but on the other hand, maybe not. So I'm out $500 to start with, and that's the least of my worries. My wife says, you've been in a lousy mood the last month. I said, yeah. I said, we had another high wind the other day, and I was worried sick about that. Luckily, nothing happened. But I'm telling you, that's a bad situation. When I see the kids out there, I say to myself, wow, if it comes down, and he knows about it, because he came up in the meantime, looked at the one that was down, looked at the one on the other side, and said, I've got to get that tree out of here. That was, oh, I got the dates here, but that was about 2.5 weeks ago. Nothing has happened. So I talked to a reasonable tree trimmer, and he said, do you want to pay for it? I said, no. He said, but he gave me a real reasonable rate, and I said, why don't you just drop a flyer off at his house? Maybe he's waiting on somebody to chop that other one up on the ground. But I never heard back from him. He did call me and said, have you heard anything? And I said, no. So, and I did talk to Edison. They couldn't do anything except unless the power is a problem. So here's where I'm at. I live with it over extended by my house, and it's probably a 50-foot high, and it's probably about 20 inches at the bottom, maybe not quite that much. But you can understand what I'm saying, because if it goes and takes my electric, and takes my house, can take my cars, can take my family room, and I'm out $500. That's where I'm at. And it's a doggone shame that I have to live like that, because he's waiting for it to fall in the wind, and he doesn't have to pay anybody to take it down. Maybe then he'll take both of them out, drag them both out of there. I just don't think it's right, and I don't know what the village can do, but I would appreciate any help.
Well, I did go up and talk, the lady that lived, Angie, is that her name?
Well, I don't know the neighbor's name, but she's the woman with the children next to my driveway.
Yeah, I was up there, and she was out cleaning her van, and I talked with her a little bit. I saw where the tree was down between the two houses on the other side.
That was lucky.
I saw where the dead one's at and the wires that come through it. In your situation, you weren't home up there.
No.
But when I talked to Chris from Edison, and then he finally did make it up there. He said there's nothing that they will do other than if the landlord gets somebody to cut it down or trim it up, that they would shut the power off so that there wasn't an issue with power coming through the lines, and they would assist that way. Legally, we can't get involved or do anything, can we, Jim?
Beyond a right-of-way issue?
Oh, yeah,
Yeah, it's well beyond,
yeah,
Yeah.
it's back off the road,
yeah.
probably 30, 40 feet anyway, 50 feet, whatever your houses are. But, I did stop, you said 4 houses down, I didn't have his
Well,
address.
it's 81.
Yeah, I did stop down there, but, there was no one, home at that house either. Just to maybe as a elected official, just announce or
Well, I would
introduce
appreciate it
myself.
if you could make some contact with him, because I mean, I don't think he's a lowlife, but I do think he's stuck in low gear. And I also think that if you look at the condition of that house, there's not a lot of money spent on upkeep. The leaves are still there from the first leaf that fell in the fall, and I paid over $300 to have my leaves picked up. And you can imagine with all the wind we've had, my yard is still full of leaves.
Was it you that told me, I think you did, but she also reinforced it, that he was up and looked at
Yes.
that, and I thought the comment was that he was looking into having it handled in the next couple of weeks, but that, if you didn't say that, then she did.
Well, he said, I've got to take that tree down. I'm going to take that tree down, is what she told me. And I didn't get a statement from her. I mean, that's a quote as best as I can remember. But anything that would build a fire under that situation, I'm telling you, it's, because, first of all, my wife just got through 2 operations, and she's trying to get her back to health. And she says, well, what is wrong with you? Why do you fret over something like that? Well, I know what happens. I was in the insurance business for a lot of years. When a tree hits a house, I mean, you don't say, well, let's just take the tree off the house. There's gonna be damage to the house. There could be damage to others, but it could be damage to life, and the electricity's gonna go. So I gotta find a place to live and pay the $500 deductible to do anything about it. That's where I'm at right now.
Well, I'll take another stab at trying to reach out and talk to him again. I don't know what the end result of that'll be, but Jim, other than, and you say you've talked to an attorney, right?
Well, I talked to my attorney,
Well,
and he,
The civil matter, I mean,
You know, just sitting here thinking about it, if the condition of a tree is a nuisance, you could treat it as a nuisance and have it removed.
definitely is.
well,
Under the vegetation portion of a nuisance rule.
I would have to say that going up there, looking at the situation, nuisance is a good word, but it's also a safety issue. The
That's the
thing's,
biggest
the
thing.
thing's dead, it's right by his house. If it falls one direction, it's gonna hit his house. If it falls the other
Yeah,
direction,
that's
it's
another
gonna.
thing, it could hit his house, and
His house.
that first one that fell could have hit his house,
Yeah.
but luckily, she said, I was in the backyard and I heard it crash, and I went around and there was a tree laying between the houses.
Where's this at?
They may not be so lucky
Spring Valley.
on the next one.
Spring Valley.
And when I saw those kids playing in the front yard the other day, I thought to myself, wow, somebody's gotta care about those kids. And she's probably stuck in the middle, because she can't build a fire under the landlord. And, so that's all I'm saying. And any help you can give me would be appreciated. I haven't been sleeping good. Every time the wind comes up, I say, oh boy, here goes. Like you told me that some of your trees roll down after the ground gets wet. Well, that's exactly what happened on the other side.
Yeah,
there.
that break.
And the
Yeah.
ball of that
Ball
tree
and
is this
everything
big.
came up. I saw that one, yeah.
And I got
And it
to-
was a pine also.
Yes,
Yeah.
and this is May. Well, 10 years ago, I've been through 4 renters there. 10 years ago, a guy stopped on a Saturday afternoon and said, you own this pine? I said, no. He said, boy, there are a lot of dead pines in this subdivision. He said, I'm going around, and he said, I'm making people offer to take them down. I said, well, it's not mine. I said, but the guy lives right down there. He went down, no dice. He wasn't interested in taking it down. That was 10 years ago. So,
Okay, well, we've got, at least I've got some of that information written. I didn't have the 10-year part. But as our legal counsel just mentioned, I'm gonna talk with him after the meeting just to make sure, but I'll approach, the other guy's name's Ron too.
yeah.
I'll approach the other Ron and see if I can, as you called it, light a fire, get some kind of a movement out of him, and I'll let you know.
Okay, well, I'd just like to say one thing. I'm not here to cause trouble. I'm not here to get him in trouble. I'm here to keep my place safe. And also, I'm not stupid. If that falls on his house, with all them people and them dogs in it, is that it's not gonna be a pretty sight regardless. And his electrical goes right through the lower branches of that tree. So all I can say is, any help you can give me, I'm not trying to assassinate character here. What I'm trying to do is just sleep a little better at night, because worrying about that tree, every time I pull into the driveway, I said, don't pull the car all the way up, leave it out by the street. I said, because if that thing goes, and my wife says, you're worried about something that probably isn't gonna happen. Well, she may be right.
If Mama's not happy, no one's happy.
That's right.
So I'll see.
I thank you for listening.
See if I
to
can,
what
no,
I
you're
got to
welcome,
say.
Ron. We'll see if we can get you some relief.
Should we send a letter to the owner that we have the right to take it down?
Well,
Maybe that'll move him on. I don't know, I'm just asking.
coming from the board, I guess
Yeah,
that
that's what
probably
I'm
would be
thinking.
all right. Yeah, I mean, that, he might be,
Short of declaring it a nuisance, that'd be a reasonable thing to do.
I like that, Wes. I've already stopped once and didn't catch him, but,
Well, I think the letter, at least he knows if he don't take it down, we will take it down, put it on his taxes at least, right?
yeah. Yeah, that's fine with me. Personal visits sometimes are beneficial, sometimes
Oh,
they're
no,
not.
I agree, yeah.
So, if you wanna make a motion, we gotta get, I know his first name's Ron, I'll have to get it, my notes and get his name and address and
It's
we can
Maine,
send him.
M-A-I-N.
The other Ron's got it right there.
Yeah, I've got the whole.
Well,
thing
hey,
there.
you're a wealth of knowledge, Ron. What's the address on Mr. Maine?
Well, it's, 8581.
8581 Camelot.
I think it is, yeah, ends in 81.
You
It's
wanna?
on the other side of the street.
Yeah, I know, I'm sure it's down there in the 8581 area. You wanna make that motion to send him a letter indicating that the tree situation has been brought to our attention on his rental property, and that address on that rental property I have, but what is that next to you?
I should have it here, no? I don't. Oh, 8636 is my side of the street.
So the tree situation and, on his rental at 86, you said 33 what?
I'm gonna double check these, but 8581 is his address, and 8636 is the rental
8636,
property.
right,
Yeah.
on his rental that needs to be addressed.
I'm not sure of the wording, but I'll make a motion that 8636 Camelot,
Maybe Jim, if you
You maybe
could
word
get,
that?
could get with the ladies and on the content of it,
Sure.
that'll
Could I
have.
check those addresses for you one more time, so
Yeah,
we don't misdirect them? I'll tell you what I'll do. I will call with them tonight or tomorrow.
you can call me at home, you have my
I'll
number.
give you, yes, I do. I'll give you both addresses. I'm pretty sure those are both correct. And I do appreciate any help you can give me, because I'm not just, tilting windmills. I'm looking at some big, heavy problem. If it falls my way, if it falls his way, he's got his own problem.
Well, the other end's safety.
Yes, it is.
Kids and the lady brought it up, so, we'll stay on it and see what, with Mr. Matthews' input on a letter, see if we can nudge him to legally get it moved, or we can look at it as a nuisance factor, which I have no problem doing. I saw the situation. I've been up there and witnessed it, so,
Yeah.
thank you for coming in.
Okay, thank you very much.
I will change that to the address to be announced, I guess.
Yeah, we'll double check it, and then I'll get that to you in the
Did you
morning
make
for
the
them.
motion?
Made a
He
motion.
did.
And I don't have the name of the lady that lives there. the only lady living there, I can get it if I need.
I don't think.
I got it written down on some notes at home.
Okay. very
Thank you
good.
for coming in.
Thank you.
Did we vote on that?
Do what now?
Did we vote on that?
No,
Okay.
the resolution, or motion to send a letter to Mr. Maine pertaining to tree problem on his rental property, but the content, Jim will fine tune it, and then I will get you the name, proper name and address to make sure all it's verified of the rental property and his address where to send it. So I'll second his motion to send that letter. So, call roll?
Mr. Stevens?
Yes.
Mr. Camp?
Yes,
Okay,
thank you, sir.
yeah, thanks for coming in.
Thank you, gentlemen and ladies.
You're welcome, sir. Okay, we need a motion for the Board of Elections to place 2 permanent updated ADA accessible signs and striping in front of our building. They asked for that permission, so do you have any problem with that, Lester?
No, sir.
Our building is used as a voting location, so I'll make that motion to approve the request of the Board of Elections.
I'll second it.
Call roll?
Mr. Camp?
Yes.
Mr. Stevens?
Yes.
Yeah, they sent a sign company from Camp.
Yeah, there was a letter there that came, they're paying the company to do it. Okay, well, that's all I have at this time. If some other things come up, I'll bring them up at the appropriate time. Mr. Camp?
The sirens, I never heard back, chief, and I called B&C and never heard back from him. What happened to the sirens the night of
I
the?
never heard back from him either. But I know that we were not in the parallelogram, I do know that.
Okay.
So the parallelogram is what's gonna set those off.
Boy, they sure thought we were, cause it was really.
Well, them saying it and showing the
No,
no,
I mean, I'm
putting
just
it.
looking on the weather maps when it's coming through.
I understand that, sir, but if we're not in that parallelogram, those sirens are not gonna go off.
Okay. Well, B&C never did call back on it, but.
So, no, I sent them an email and, I also made phone calls, to them and did not ever get any response from them.
Okay, yeah, I'll keep up on it just to see what he says, but, door-to-door sales, trying to find her thing. Lisa Jenkins, I know there's only 2 of us here tonight, so, but I'll at least bring it up and I'll do whatever. I would really like us to put a, registry for that. Oh, go ahead.
Kristen made up a sheet.
I made up a sheet and I gave it to Attorney Matthews to look over.
So look at it.
Yeah, she drew on her experience, prepared a nice form that would just provide for the registration. Seems like all the information that you would want to know as the township for the registration.
I'd like to see that go forward. I'm gonna ask Chief Brown, because he's kind of regulated, kind of in a way. If you wouldn't mind speaking to that, would you?
I think it's a great idea. I know the city of Canal Fulton already does it. At least we're getting people to register with us so we know who should be in town doing door-to-door sales. Our guys go out constantly in the summer. Seems like we follow them from allotment to allotment, so we're dealing with the same people all the time. So if we can get them to register, we know who's out there. I think it puts some peace of mind for our residents too. We can say they've registered.
If they fill that out and turn it back into us, we can get that on the Facebook page and we can put it on the website also to let residents know that those folks will be in the area. So, you know, hopefully if they're filling out one of those, they should have some kind of identification with them also. And again, that would give the public a little heads up that there might be somebody in the area and, you know, at least who it is.
Have you gave it any more thought, Mike?
No, not until now, but what everybody's saying makes sense. From a legal standpoint, we pass a resolution that we want these folks to register here at the administration building during our hours. So they'll have to know when we're open, that'll have to be posted.
Entirely content neutral registration only. It's not
Right.
an attempt to regulate any First Amendment rights.
Okay, so if that form is, and then
Yeah, it's very well done. It's very
Implemented.
complete. It should be everything you would need to
And the chief was just saying that they could put it on the website, so that's one way of getting information out. Joan's here with the fake news, no, I mean with the paper. And- That was a Freudian slip. A slip, Joan.
Yeah.
I wanted to see if you were paying attention. Yes, ma'am, her pen's just burning up now. Oh, I will pay for that. Joan is here, and we can get it in the paper, but, one thing I wanna make sure is that if we do this, that they gotta understand, you know, we're not gonna be open special, you know, days and extra hours just for, you know, this thing to go on. They got to get here during our regular hours, that the office is open. So if all that's clear, and if that's giving them enough time and dates to get in here and days, then, you know, I say, yeah, well, let's give it a try. And I like what Chief said about the peace of mind and the idea that the residents know we're at least monitoring folks that are coming into the area and doing their thing as far as sales and whatnot.
Are we gonna charge for it,
That's just what I was gonna ask.
a fee?
Is there gonna be a fee?
Is the PD doing it?
No,
Up here?
There, I don't know.
It would be implied that you could charge a fee, but it would only be for whatever reasonable administrative costs
Yeah.
would be involved.
Well, how about if we want to address it and get it started, that there's no fee at this time, but we'll take a look at it and see what amount of time it is taking, what other chores or whatever duties it's adding on to our staff. If it looks like it's gonna be something that's gonna take time, then we might have a small fee implemented, but at this time, I don't see a reason to do that, if it's just gonna be something.
I think the city has signs coming into their or their entity that says solicitor permit required. It may be something we might wanna look at, just so people coming in from just the main roads, you know, 93, Orville, Erie, so they come in, they see that they do have to register.
Good point.
So obviously you're gonna have some cost getting those signs made, so, I don't know what it costs, that it may not be bad to have a small fee just to cover, you know, our cost of having the signs done.
Well, see, now we're already getting into cost, yeah, so.
And do we have a definition of what sales are? I mean, are Boy Scout Girl Scout cookies and the local, because I assure you that when somebody reads that in the paper tomorrow, we'll get calls this week wanting to know if their daughter has to register or whatever. What do you want to do there? Are they exempt? I mean, Girl Scout cookies and, you know, the baseball teams for soccer clubs do we
What
want
do
to?
you call that?
Nonprofits.
Those
Yeah,
are
what
the
do you
things
call
we
it?
started talking about, where you always lead down a proverbial slippery slope on carving out things that would be based on content and their activity. So, I mean, Frank brings up a perfectly good point. I suppose if you wanted to draw a line to give you a bright line test just on profit versus nonprofit entities, you could do that. That'd be a reasonable way to fix it.
What do you, C3, or what do you call that?
501c3.
501c3, if you have that.
Yeah, but Girl Scouts aren't that.
Yeah, you could just
It may
refer,
be.
They're just a
refer to
club.
it more
No,
broadly
they might be
as
that.
any non-
Depends on who they're with. Boy Scouts are.
Yeah, Boy Scouts are.
Yeah, but the Girl Scouts that are just going around and the guys from the soccer team,
No,
they're not gonna have.
a lot of those are 501c3s.
Yeah, but
If they're
they
doing,
don't know that though, is what I'm saying.
And
They-
churches may have a different classification too, you want to still.
Yeah, you got
keep that
churches-
exemption.
So just go
I would
nonprofit.
more-
Nonprofit would probably do the
I
job, I
would
would
more
think.
broadly refer to them as non.
So where would that be,
In your resolution, you would require the registration of only for-profit commercial enterprises that are going to send out door-to-door solicitors in the township.
I like that.
Yeah.
That's
and
what
where,
I said.
and how is that message besides the newspaper and our website gonna get out there, or is that good enough?
Well, again, I think the police chief's idea is fine.
So we're gonna,
I assume that doesn't need to be that much detail, that your sign has to specify profit or nonprofit. If you invariably get a few calls from people, hey, I'm with a church group and we're gonna run through here, your staff will just have to tell them you are exempt, you don't qualify. But others who are doing commercial door-to-door solicitations will know they have to register.
Okay, so what is your resolution, Mr. Camp?
I think it'd be you have to register for-profit, sales. Is that?
Door to door.
Or commercial door-to-door solicitation.
Yeah, commercial door-to-door sales. You have to register for that. Won't even say nonprofit, then just say, unless you want that in there, just say it's just for commercial, sales. And, I think without the signs right now, let's let it run once, and then we can, if we get into.
Do you want to wait till next meeting so Mr. Lockhart can weigh in on this then, to finalize it?
That's whatever you.
Yeah, I would prefer that.
Okay.
He might throw a wrench into it.
Okay.
Or bring up something else that we're missing. I guess for,
Les, in that motion, maybe put the Township Administration Building 5828, give them a place to register.
Yeah, yeah. if
we're
gonna
not
wait till next
gonna do
meeting.
it today. We're gonna wait till Sean's here on the full board. I
Okay.
happened to think of that while you're sitting.
No, that's fine, yeah, that's just one of,
Okay.
I just wanted to bring it up, and I think it's a good idea. I talked to the chief, I wanted to see what he thought, because he'll be the one that'll be
Okay.
getting the calls, so if he's for it, we can wait till the next meeting.
Yeah, we had to fine tune it by then.
Right,
Yeah,
okay.
you'll be here, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Other items, sir?
John Martin, about the Orville Street, I have a letter of intent for the property up there. We have a problem with regional planning getting it approved right now, so we have to go for a variance, if I'm right, Frank, right? If we want to proceed. So it's a 4-to-1 ratio, you said?
Yes,
Yeah.
with the depth.
With the depth, so we would have to apply and see if they would give us a variance to sell it. He's agreed to pay the $30,000, but we have to go through that.
Well, we have to go through,
It's regional planning proposing a rule on it? Regional planning proposing a rule that they're
Yes.
imposing on?
Yes,
Yeah, my position would be that your property is immune because it's owned by a political entity, but
oh,
I'm not sure that's kind of an aggressive position that some political entities don't take. I assert that for clients though routinely. If you have essentially, if you're a political subdivision, you're exempt or immune from your own zoning rules and other land use regulations because you're a sovereign entity of the state, a separate political subdivision.
could you check on that then with planning?
Yeah, I can get their feedback.
What was her name?
Regional
Jolene?
planning, they disagree.
Jonelle.
Jonelle is the one I
Okay.
went over to, and I gave her a map of what we were talking about, subdividing it off. And
If, I can tell you this, in those circumstances, if you intend to assert immunity, the law requires that you try to reach an accord, a reasonable accommodation. It's sort of like an interactive process in the employment world to try and reach an accord.
Okay.
But then generally, if it's exempt, you win out, you're allowed to do what you want with your property. And the other side's only remedy would be to try to enjoin you.
What do you think?
Well, if you're gonna turn it over to Mr. Matthews to
Is that
pursue.
okay with
Yeah,
you?
yeah.
If you don't mind, then that way, maybe we can get, go ahead, Jim.
Bidding it out.
Oh,
Because
do
the
we have?
neighbor was asking, remember?
It is actually like a landlocked property, except for this one owner that wants to buy it.
Okay?
So you couldn't hardly bid it out because nobody else could.
Well, remember, what's nice about real estate is you don't have to bid it out.
Oh, that's what you remember.
As long as you have a unanimous board, you can sell it for whatever agreed upon price.
Okay.
All right,
Well, that
bidding
answers
at
that
all.
problem. I wasn't sure, and I
Yeah.
thought better make sure of that. So you'll go ahead and call regional planning. Okay.
Okay.
I appreciate that. I did talk at one meeting about a mower over at the park. And I did this. It maybe go nowhere, but I wanted to bring it up tonight. I got two prices, or one price, on a Kubota like list prices, and you get the same thing through, oh my gosh, what do we go through? State bid. State bid is like 13.5 for one, and the other one, state bid 16.4. But if we traded ours in before it gets real bad, I think it might not be a bad idea. We might not have that much difference. I know that thing's really got use, so I hate to see it go down, we have to put a motor or do anything major to it to find out we'd have to.
Well,
These were through Uncle for equipment, but Jim says there's Akron tractor sales, that he lives in the township.
well, you wanna get another bid on them?
We can do that, if I can have that, that way I know model for
Then you'll have it
model.
for next meeting, and Lockhart will
Well,
be here. This would be bought out of park money?
Well, we got the grant money from First Energy coming, which is 30,000. I thought we'd take a portion of that, put towards this, and trade the mower in. We might not owe much out of our own money right now, if that's something you're thinking about.
The mower was split with all the departments, so.
Yeah.
Four ways.
Yeah,
We could, okay.
we'd split it up amongst the three.
Well, go ahead and pursue it, and then if we have another price back from Akron, why?
I'll
Sean will be here
check
next
this
meeting.
out, I'll get a
Yeah,
hold of the
it's
sales guy,
supposed to be
deal
state
with it.
bid, so it
Yes.
should be the same price, but
Okay.
I just think, I hate to see, that thing has really got its use over there.
Oh, yeah.
And
Yeah,
I think
it's- It's junk.
Well, they had brought it up before
Yeah, I
about it.
did bring it up
It's always,
before.
we're always putting money into it, I mean, it's,
Yeah,
I know
it's-
you don't wanna spend money.
It's
but
been
No, but
it's
it's-
been a good mower, but now it's getting cost,
Well,
so the cost is starting to,
I did that.
it's 10, 12 years old, because we were. in
outrun the,
garage when-
the life.
Yeah, well, I'm thinking it's getting to that point, and I think we're just gonna end up spending more money now.
Okay.
Especially if you get state bid on a mower, I didn't know you could get that. but-
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, okay. The cemetery, I have not heard back from Akron U. We sent them a note today to find out. I'm hoping to find out shortly. I'm gonna pursue that pretty heavy. Soccer, I have their, I think I gave it to you, Kristen, the schedule. Everything starts, the practice starts 4:1 and the game starts 4:13. I'll get copies if you want them, but I gave it to Kristen. We're gonna post it over there and here. I think you already posted it, am I right, or not? Did you post it on the board?
Yeah.
Okay, we're gonna take it over there and post it on the reader board for anybody else who wants it. So, and the insurance is the same insurance. She needs to know if we need an update version of it. Is that what you?
Yeah.
Okay, I will call her in the morning. Okay. I'll do that one. I'm taking a lot of time here.
You're fine.
On this, we're having, hopefully, somebody comes tonight from the park board. The three things was the tractor, and Jim thinks we have some fence, split rail fence, to come down 93. That's one thing I'd like to do this year, put some more fence up. Try to get it pretty much done for free labor, but I wanna know if it's okay. I'll talk to them tonight, but I was wondering what the board thought about putting that fence up. It's already here, it's just gotta be installed.
Okay.
And then the sand volleyball court. If you think you're interested, I'm pursuing to get enough money to do most of it by a company that is not involved here in the township, to pay a good portion of it. Would you have any objection to putting one in with a little bit of that First Energy money and a good donation from somebody
Well,
else?
give us some prices.
Okay, I just wanna know before I talk to
No,
him
no,
tonight.
get us some prices. I mean, I'm interested in,
Yeah, well, it was around 7,000 for the sand
Okay.
volleyball, but,
we'll find out what the particular company's contribution would be and what ours would be, and we can go from there.
okay. Park board meeting tonight at 6:30. Edison, if I take it right, April, first billing in April, you'll start your 4.57 out. Your electric range will change till May 2021. And then 30,000 comes in July.
Did I read that letter right, that there's no opt-out? Because down in the content of that letter that First Energy sent out, at one point, they said if you don't opt out before I think they give you 2 weeks or before a date, then after that, there could be a fee. But then another portion up here where it says none.
Yes.
So what part of this letter do you follow?
I have a call into Laura, and I don't know. right
Yeah,
now.
find out, because that's
Laura.
conflicting. One place it says they're gonna charge you if you don't get in within the 2 weeks, and then up there it says
Says
no
no.
charge.
No consolation, no cancellation.
Cancellation, that's it,
Yeah.
excuse me, I said opt out, cancellation, same thing.
I wished I would've, I didn't get back. call
Okay,
back
no,
yet.
I just, you
I'll
you
know
brought
by
it
the
up,
next meeting,
and I
yeah.
read it, and that's
Yeah, I know it
conflicting to
didn't
me.
make sense,
No,
no.
it did not.
That should start the first week in April.
Yes,
It's like
uh-huh.
for 2 years. on that. The Y has started, if anybody has been up on Erie Street, it's out of the ground even, so get a little sight of that. I was up there the other day, doing a little helping, but, let's see what else. I think that's the only, I'm hoping.
Well, some other items come up.
Yeah. I had a whole list, I apologize for that, but.
No, you're fine.
I just want to make sure, well, the park board meeting, the reason I brought up about some of these items at this meeting is to get a little feel before I go to the park meeting,
Okay,
so they don't, okay.
you got 1/3 of the field,
Yes,
you got 2/3 of the field, but Lockhart's not here.
right, I wasn't figuring him not being here, so. I don't know what this one is, oh, this is EPA. Okay, that's all I have, sir, thank you very much.
Okay, before we get into departments, I see our now Fulton Mayor, Joe, do you have anything you want to bounce off
No,
of?
I don't,
Just
but I
sponge.
brought some heat with me this time, so.
How about the bearded guy back there? Does he have anything to say, Mr. Booker, or is he,
Yeah, do you want me to do it now?
well, I'm giving you the floor.
I'll defer my time to the
I just want
gentleman from
I want to say
council.
one thing. These flags I came up with, put their copycat of the city. So I hope you're okay with the little flags we put up here.
Sure.
I thought it looked kind of patriotic, and we need that right
It-
now in
it-
our country.
We need that,
So,
absolutely.
and the ladies, I kind of wanted that over there, and I hope that was okay, but the ladies come up with they can see the people, so,
They told me it was your idea.
as was, yes.
Oh,
But they moved it.
okay.
They did all the hard work, I just
Okay.
came up with the idea, but I wanted to thank, I thought it looked really nice in there and copied it out of your system, so.
I like the layout, I'll tell you that much.
Yeah, that's better.
Nice seeing their faces.
Hey, after 10 years, we
Yeah.
don't move
Gotta
real
make sure you're
quick,
gonna keep them
but we
around.
move. Councilman Booker, you have something to bring to our attention?
Yeah, I'll be really quick.
Well, you want to announce yourself and your address, please, for the record?
Sure, my name's Dan Booker, City Council, 723 South Canal Street. About a month and a half ago, a girl named Christina Futrell came to the TAP committee meeting and introduced us to an idea called the Sister Cities, which is kind of an exchange program that some cities in the United States have done with similar sized communities overseas. And was interested in trying to put together a committee who could possibly bring this to Canal Fulton. Dave Van Gosbeck kind of took the bull by the horns and started the committee. He asked me to join. I brought it to a city council meeting, and Victor Coliani from the school board happened to be at the meeting, so he wanted to be on board as well. So I wanted to reach out to the township as well to see if there was any representatives from the trustees or anybody else within the township that wanted to join our committee. I brought a little bit of information. It's a little presentation that Mrs. Futrell had put together. If you guys wanna, I didn't bring enough for everybody because I didn't know how many I needed.
I
but
was at the meeting.
You were, so I just want to throw it out there to you guys. If any of you are interested in joining us, get a hold of me, and I don't know when our next meeting's gonna be, but we are looking to move forward with this.
They still talk in Germany?
Yes,
Yeah.
that's the plan. We've got one city that they have been kind of singling out as an opportunity, but we don't want to announce anything until we've reached out to them to see if there was any interest.
Right.
So we were looking, instead of just looking at cities that are the size of Canal Fulton, we wanted to expand it to cities that have roughly the same as our school districts. So obviously the township was going to need to be involved with that as well.
Well, thank you for that. We appreciate the consideration. We'll have one here, and we'll review it. Anyone cares up here to take a copy or whatever, and how are you getting the, is it just elected officials, or can it be residents or business owners, or?
Anybody who wants to join at this point, I guess the way that it works is if we find a city that agrees to be our sister city. There will be a resolution passed or signed by the mayor, and then we would work together. There's actually a website, sistercities.org, that you can use to put it all together, but we haven't made it that far into the discussions to
Okay.
even include them.
Okay.
That girl really seems really upbeat about doing this.
She
too.
is, she's very excited about it. She was hoping to come tonight and speak instead of making me do it, but it didn't happen, so you guys were stuck with me.
Well, no, you've covered, you know, what
Very
what
good.
we need to know, the basics. We appreciate that. So, thank you for that.
Well, thank you for giving me the opportunity.
You're welcome. I put you ahead of the department, so you and
I'm
the
on
mayor, you and the mayor got billing ahead of the fire department there. Chief, don't take it as a setback.
None,
I mean, you
no
know,
problem.
we always save the best for last, by the way, so. Fire away, chief. That's why Malito gets the last
Well,
word.
it's down there, last is down there. Thank you, sir. I just have a couple of things. We had Murray, did you get a email from Chief Podlager for active 911? Okay. So, you want me to do it?
Yep.
Okay. So, we need to update our active 911. Active 911 is part of the system that we use for notification. Gives us our mapping and our, what the call is, where it's going, what's going on with the call. It gives us mapping for hydrant locations, tells us if there's anything special that we need to know about that particular residence or business. Gives us if we need to call the police, for instance, or if they have a vicious dog, or if there is a lockbox on the location, and it gives us that information. The fire department is the only one that gets that information. And that way, when we go in and take care of a call, it just speeds things up for us. It also gives us a mapping location. The city and the township maps are loaded in here through the Stark County GIS system. So we have all the hydrant locations on there. Anything that would be special for us to use, it's on there. And anybody on the department who's going on the call can see that. It comes up on their phones. So we provide that for the employees. That is $445.24. We used to use a system called I Am Responding. I Am Responding used to cost us between $800 and $900 for a contract, so this is about half the cost of that. And it's something that is used by Lawrence Township, North Lawrence, Canal, Fulton, Jackson Township, Maslin, the hazmat team. So what we have been doing is we've been sharing our thoughts with the other departments. So folks that are on the hazmat team might be paying their stuff. So we don't have to pay for that. But we might have a guy from Maslin Fire that works on Lawrence Township, and we pay for his. So we do kind of a cost sharing. And the way it has spread out accidentally is that now we cost share all of our employees for this stuff by about 5 different places. So it actually has worked to our advantage to be able to share our information. And when those calls come in, because they're joined up at the top, if someone comes from Jackson Township to Lawrence Township or Canal Fulton, they get the same information on their map that we get. So that it doesn't slow down, you know, as far as getting to our patient or the information that is pertinent to that call. It goes to all the people that it needs to go to. So I would like permission to re-up that renewal.
And who's that through?
It's called Active 911.
And that's for how much?
$445.24.
Okay, any questions or additional comments? I'll make the motion to approve the expenditure in the amount given by the fire chief and the provider. Do we have a second?
Second.
Call roll?
Mr. Camp?
Yes.
Mr. Stevens?
Yes.
Thank you. The next thing I have are there was 2 education requests that we gave a first reading to at the last meeting. One is for Chief Podlager to go to the hazmat conference in Baltimore. It's a 4-day conference. We have been able to share the cost of this with Stark County EMA. Normally they excuse me, between Stark County EMA, us, and the city of Maslin, we've shared the cost of that. Unfortunately, this year, there was no grant money available for us to do this, so we're paying a little bit more this year than what we normally would have done. So the cost for Chief Podlager to go is $1,000 plus the travel. He's driving out there, and that gets him into the conference and takes care of his hotel lodging. So what this does for us is, because he is part of the hazmat team, and Maslin pays his overtime and everything that he does for training. He's a control officer, so he's one of 3 people or 4 people in the county that is first to respond to all hazmat incidents in Stark County and in some adjoining counties. But this is our portion. We pay for a couple of guys to go be on the team. We pay for this for Dan. And then when hazmat has to come here, we don't have to pay anything. If it's a subdivision or a municipality that does not put into the hazmat organization for the county, they get a bill for the hazmat team to come there. So by us doing this little bit every couple of years and helping out with having a couple of people on the hazmat team, that alleviates all the costs that would come to us as a township or a fire department.
How many, it's us, city of Maslin, who else is?
EMA, Stark County EMA.
paying
So,
So $1,000 plus travel expense?
correct.
You want these separate motions? Do they need to be?
Well, this is just for him, yeah, just one motion. I don't care how you do it. The other one's not the same thing. The other
Okay,
one's
well,
not the same.
I'll make that motion. We did get explanation last meeting from, our first reading from Podlacher, so I'll make the motion to approve the expenditure for Podlacher and the amount given of $1,000 plus travel expense to go to this in Baltimore.
Correct.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Call the roll?
Mr. Camp?
Yes.
Mr. Stevens?
Yes.
Thank you. Next, I have the second reading for the Ohio Fire Chiefs Conference. This is our time to go down and do the education program for 4 days down in Columbus. It goes over training, management, budget, legal. There's a whole bunch of classes that we go to. Dan and I usually go down and separate, and we go to as many classes as we can in those 4 days. And we've been able to make some really good contacts down there with other fire chiefs and learn a lot of things. When we come back to you guys with ideas, surprisingly, they're not our ideas. We take them from other people and, put them to use here in Lawrence Township. So our total cost on that is $1,813.20. That's for both of us to go to the conference and the hotel.
Can you check with the fiscal officer for funds?
We have approved, yes.
Actually, on both of these, both Podlacher and, okay. Any questions, Les?
No,
You want to make that motion then?
I'll make that motion for the 1,800, and what then was it?
$1,813.20
20 cents to go to Columbus
For the,
for
Ohio Fire Chiefs Conference.
Ohio Fire Chief Conference. I'll second that motion. Any additional discussion needed?
no, sir.
Call the roll?
Mr. Stevens?
Yes.
Mr. Camp?
Yes.
Thank you. And then I have a first reading for 2 other folks to go to training. So, starting in 2019, the paramedic and EMT programs for the state of Ohio have added additional things for the paramedics and EMTs to complete in their training. Sometimes they go outside of that and put extra training on the people that already have their paramedic and EMT cards. And that's what they did this year. They are now enforcing an additional training for tactical medical emergency. It directly relates to the mass shootings that have happened throughout the United States and active shooter scenarios in schools. And so what they're doing is they're forcing, now they're not forcing, they're putting it as part of the curriculum now to go through paramedic EMT school, that you have to have this portion of your tactical medical training. On the back side of that in order for me to renew my paramedic card in 2019, I had to take this online course for tactical medical emergency stuff. Once they give us that training, then we have that knowledge, and people start to expect things. They start to expect us to go into a situation that we normally would not have gone into, which is going into an active shooter situation. They're expecting us to go in alongside or just behind the police department, and as they clear an area, they're expecting us to go in and save people. And they've done all these courses that they've put out for Stop the Bleed programs for schools now. They're doing it for businesses, colleges, that they're training people inside the building to be able to do some care. And then they're putting it out there that now we are trained to go in and do that, which, you know, normally we run into an EMS situation, or we might run into a house fire, and that's as dangerous as it gets. But now they're giving us mandates to take training. Once people figure out we have that training, it's not going to be acceptable for us to stand back and wait for the police department to tell us what to do. We're going to have to work better with the police department or the state highway patrol or the sheriff's department. So currently I have 3 people in the department that are trained as tactical medics, myself and 2 other people. So I'm going to start sending a few people every year to go through this tactical medical training. It's a 40-hour class. And this has not been approved by the fiscal officer, so I'm not asking for it to get approved tonight. But it is being done in accordance with Mercy Medical Center, and it's being run through the Alliance Police Department Training Center. So we have to pay $400 for the class, which again is a 40-hour class, Monday through Friday. But we don't have to pay for any lodging, we don't have to pay any mileage or food or anything like that because it's within the county. These folks are going to be used to come back and do kind of a train the trainer type thing, where we're going to put together a training program that will make sure that, you know, eventually it's going to come to a point where we're going to have to buy vests. I know we've talked about buying tactical vests for the medics, and I've tried my best to not have to do that and use education, but Chief Brown can back me up on the fact that we are having more and more calls where they are domestic violence. We're having, you know, just things that mental illness issues, drug abuse issues, and we're seeing a growing trend where people are becoming injured that are going to help other people.
I think we
Our
should add
people.
the vest.
So we're working into that. So that's another dollar amount. So,
You had said that earlier, yeah.
Yeah.
and I have talked with Chief Brown, and I spent some time talking to Chief Schwartz the other day from Canal Fulton Police Department. We have these vests at Jackson Township. North Lawrence has a type of vest that they are wearing. So, you know, eventually we're going to have to get on the bandwagon and do this, but I also want people trained so that they know what they're wearing. They have to train in this equipment so they know how to use it. They're very hot, they're very cumbersome. There's a whole bunch of different things that they need to know over and above doing their EMS and fire job that we currently do, just to keep people safe, to keep them out of Chief Brown's way and Chief Brown's men's way, or officer's way. They have to know how to operate, and I'm not willing yet to cut people loose to go get in his way and make his job more difficult. You know, obviously, our outlook is, our mission is to, you know, do the best that we can for our citizens and the people that are visiting our community. That's what our job is, but our first line of defense for us is also our own safety. So this is the start of us protecting ourselves a little better so that we can protect our community better. So the total for this particular project is $800, and I'll just, you know, let you stew on that for a couple of weeks, because this isn't due until May. So, you know,
How
we
much
can.
are the vests? Do you
The
know?
vests they're around $500 a piece.
I
Some of the
still
ones
think
I've looked at, you can go all the way up to however much you want to spend, but what we're looking at, yeah, what we're looking at is just,
cheap quality?
Not necessarily.
it's a level 3, A3, which is what, you know, what I wore for the SWAT medical tactical stuff that I did. You can obviously spend as much money as you want to by putting pockets on things and adding things onto the outside, which you know, we're gonna try to limit that because obviously for us, it doesn't make sense to buy a vest for every person on the department. We're going to buy as many vests as we can so that, you know, we have enough for the people on the trucks, that are going out. And, we'll go from there. We have too high of a turnover to buy an individual vest like what the police department does with, you know, 50 people between both departments and the door that revolves, you know, so many times a year. We can't possibly buy a vest for each single person.
Are they size made, or you just buy a vest?
They are sized to you, but at this point, you can't buy 50.
Yeah,
So
we have,
if you had some varying sizes,
yeah, I have-
you could.
we
give
have
your guys some
medium to
coverage.
4 extra large over at Jackson, and the guys that are big guys, they have their own vest, but the rest of them, the larges, extra large, mediums, those are all spread out amongst all the med units and the rescues.
See, I'd just like to see you have 4, 2
So-
for each ambulance.
Well, you need 3 for each ambulance,
Yeah,
because
all
we have,
three.
because you actually need
Yeah.
4 per shift, because you have 4 people, so you need to have 4 per shift, and you need to have enough for the next call. So that's why, when it starts to get into numbers, we start to double things. Now, Chief Durkee and I have talked, and, you know, we have our EMS grant that we both applied for, that we can use that this year for ballistic vests. So we're working on putting something together so that we both buy similar items so that we can, you know, use them, anybody can use them.
Yeah, that's great. I
So-
just worry about them guys, because there's people out there now that,
Well, I know.
you go into domestic violence, it's almost as bad as
You
some
never
other
get,
stuff.
we don't get called for domestic violence, we get called for a person having a seizure. And then we go in and it's a domestic violence call. So, I mean, there are plenty of times we get called for domestic violence, but the police are there first. The police aren't always there first, because
Oh, I
we
see
don't
what
always
you're
get the
saying.
call that it's domestic violence or somebody trying to hurt themselves. We might get the call that somebody doesn't feel well, and when we get there, it's a person that's trying to commit suicide or something,
I see what
because
you're
they don't want the police there. They don't call it a police action. And I've been on plenty of calls, even in public buildings, that you get called for. We got called one night for a person having a seizure in a restaurant in Jackson Township. And when we got there, it was a full-on fight. There was about 7 people involved in it, and we were the main attraction. When we walked in, we got attacked, so we got out of there. But the business owner didn't want the bad press of having the police department there, so he didn't call it in as a fight. He called it into something else. And we just don't, we can't combat that. You can't, you know, we've had plenty of opportunities where we've, you know, you pick up a periodical and they're talking about, you know, 4 firefighters that got off of a fire truck out in Arizona and ended up getting shot at a house fire that was on fire, and there was a bad guy in the bushes waiting for them to get off the truck, and he murdered them. We can't protect ourselves from that. So, you know, for us to have a vest is just a, you know, a way for us to help protect ourselves. But, you know, Chief can tell you, if there's a bad guy that wants to shoot you, he's dedicated, he's gonna shoot you.
Yeah, I agree with
So,
that.
you know, but, okay, so I'm off that soapbox.
Other items, Chief?
Nope, I'm good.
Thank you. Reports?
Yeah, just to expand a little bit, we've had 8 or 10 vests we got through a grant from Walmart, and we've had down there. And we had a lot of controversy about buying them, believe me, amongst the guys. A lot of them said, no, we don't need them, we don't need them. But a few of us said, yeah, better have it, because it's the day's coming.
Well, it's a different world,
It is,
and so you have
completely different.
to adapt and adjust and try to stay ahead of it. So, well, that's, I say it's good to hear, but it's sad also that it's come to that, so.
It is. But I'll say one thing, these vests are a lot lighter than the first ones I wore. That was in '68.
You're dating yourself, sir.
Yeah.
You're dating yourself, you're going back in the 60s. You remember those years?
Oh, yes.
You must have been a good boy.
I remember
You remember the
Vietnam
60s,
for
you
a
must have been, you must have been a good boy. The 60s was a crazy decade.
while. Yeah, the vests in Vietnam
Oh,
got very.
yeah, there you go, my friend.
Yeah.
There you go. Now that more. Other items from North Lawrence, everything?
Other than that, we're keeping busy.
Well, thank you for what you do and for your contribution to the township. Appreciate it. Police Department.
Thank you. Just one thing. I'd like to request a work session before next meeting to discuss part-time personnel.
Work session before next meeting. How long you gonna need? Half hour, hour?
A half hour, so.
And the next meeting is April
April
8th. So you're looking at 4 o'clock? Work session, police department, discuss part-time personnel?
Correct.
Lester? Cindy? Okay, I'll make that motion then
Second.
for work session. Police department. Call the roll?
8th. Mr. Camp?
Yes.
Mr. Stevens?
Yes.
Thank you, that's all I have.
Mr.
Quiet
Stevens, I
day,
got
huh?
one more thing.
Can we, discuss one thing, and probably the girls are gonna hate me, but what if we'd start this at 5 o'clock? Because we're always having work sessions, it really does kind of cut the day out pretty bad at 3:30, because you got here like 3:15. What if we started our meetings in the summer at 5? It's just an answer, it's only a half hour, but
Well, I'll think about that one. and
Yeah.
I'll get word to Lockhart, or you can, and we'll see what we come up with.
yeah, I just something I've been thinking about lately, because like today, I was here 3, was it, or a little after 3 over there, until you.
Oh, no, we're not gonna go to park and work for a half hour and then come back over here and have a
Oh, I
meeting, are
thought
we?
that's what we were
Oh.
gonna do.
And, moving right along.
Something to think about.
Well,
Half hour
we
later.
can, we can consider it,
Okay.
certainly.
I got one more thing. If I don't bring this up, Mark Shane will be mad at me. We need to try and look at a date to do a training session for the emergency plan for the township. I don't know when you guys wanna do that. I don't know, it doesn't have to be right away, it doesn't have to be at the next meeting or anything. But I would like to, have the trustees, look at some dates so that we can, we need about an hour though. So you might not wanna do it on a meeting day or do it
This
at,
is a date for training session for what?
I'm sorry,
For
sir,
what, again?
for the emergency plan, for the
Okay.
township emergency plan.
Okay. Alrighty, we can
Thank you.
take a look at some dates,
All right,
but
perfect.
you're gonna need about an hour.
Yes, sir.
That'll help out tonight. Okay,
Thank you.
road department, you're welcome.
Yes, sir, I have a few things. First thing I would like to do is get approval to prepare the chip and seal bid through Mr. Matthews. To get him the paperwork he needs, and I would like to do the bid opening.
Thanks, Dan.
I would like to have the bid opening on April 22nd, meeting at 4:30. If
Okay.
that's okay with you guys, I believe we have enough time to
Oh, yeah.
advertise and still be able to open bids.
Bid opening for,
Chip and seal.
Chip and seal. Okay, we need a motion for that then. Bid opening, 22nd deadline for chip and seal.
I'll make that motion.
Okay, and I'll second that. Call the roll?
Mr. Stevens?
Yes.
Mr. Camp?
Yes.
Next thing I have is I wanted to let you know we'll accept all material bids.
Okay. So we'll make a motion to accept all the material bids that were presented to the board at the last meeting on March 11th for the road department for 2019. Do we have a second?
Second.
Call the roll?
Mr. Camp?
Yes.
Mr. Stevens?
Yes.
Next thing I have is we need to sign board president, Mr. Stevens, you need to sign the MS4 general permit so we can get this mailed out.
Okay, we had a meeting,
Right name.
earlier meeting with
There's
Soil and
brand,
Water.
a title, a sign, and then the date.
Okay, we met earlier. Printed name or typed and then signature, right? Okay. We met earlier with Soil and Water, that was work session was for, to go over this MS4 and the other services that Soil and Water graciously provides for a fee. So, we know we're gonna owe them at least $1,500, is that correct? For this year, plus any additional charges that might stem from the additional work that they'll be doing. And Kristen has graciously agreed to take on some of this paperwork and administrative work that this MS4 is bestowed upon us. So that's where we're at with that. Okay, we don't need a motion on this, do we?
Excuse me?
Is this a resolution?
No, this just
No.
needs my signature.
No, I just need a
Okay,
signature.
I'll sign it, go ahead.
Next thing is just wanted to let the board know that we used 942.5 tons of salt this year.
So far?
Yes.
How's that compared to Do you know how it compares to other years?
Last year, we were at like 980, we were just under 1,000 ton last year.
So we're comparable.
Yeah, we're down from the average is 1,500, so.
That's what I thought.
That's good to hear.
Yes.
We're down. Okay,
Um,
other item.
Yeah, next thing is, I'm meeting with Chief Todd Logger on April 1st to put the trucks and stuff on gov deals per, I wanna make sure we have the other two trucks are secured though, and that's all done, before we put them on there.
And the other equipment? The additional
Yes, the
equipment that we
additional
okayed
equipment
in the
also.
last meeting,
We're gonna
okay.
put, I wanted to add the van that has the bucket on it.
Okay.
We don't use that enough, and for the cost it will take to maintain that in the years.
Doesn't that have to be inspected?
Yeah, every year, and it's
Okay.
pretty pricey, so.
Do you have a problem with that?
No.
Okay,
Um,
alrighty.
And then I would like to keep the broom. We wanna try a couple things. Chuck and I were talking about it. I wanna try to, like out on like Warwick Road and some of the roads, country roads, we wanna try to kick some edges off, see how it works.
Okay.
So, I don't know how
You,
well
use
or
it,
what.
use it
so
and see.
We're
I
gonna
mean,
see, and
have
if we
it.
don't, then we'll go
Then
ahead and
then we'll
advertise
get
that,
on.
but yeah.
Okay,
So, I think I'd probably need a motion to,
well, we'll make a motion to take the broom out of that bid then,
and then add the van to.
and add the van to it, the sales of equipment.
We already made a motion to do it, right?
Right.
Yeah, we're just
So we're
making
just
this
gonna
change
amend
here,
it.
yes.
We'll take the broom out and we'll add, whatever resolution
Add
it
the
was.
van.
And add the van and the, what was the other thing?
The van.
Just the
Take
van.
the broom out.
Yeah, take the broom out and put the van in.
Okay, I'll make that motion.
I'll second it.
Call the roll?
Mr. Camp?
Yes.
Mr. Stevens?
Yes.
And then, the only other thing I have is something Mr. Camp brought up at the last meeting. I didn't have the paperwork in front of me. It was the petition to vacate the roadway on Water Street. I have the paperwork here. There is, who do we need signatures from? Just the properties that touch this? Or do we need a total of
Anyone in
12?
that vicinity, you need 12.
You need 12 signatures.
Oh, you need 12 signatures?
Yeah, if there are husbands and wives, you can get that counts as 2, even though it's one property.
Okay.
Because we got a railroad going all the way down, and then there's probably not that many people on that street.
It doesn't have to be on that street, it can be in the vicinity, anybody
Oh.
that might use the street, that type.
Okay.
You could go to the adjoining street.
All right. That answers that, so.
I keep looking at me, don't he?
Well, I don't know what's going on here. You
He
guys
wants
got
me
eye
to go
contact.
around and get the signatures.
Yeah, he knows, he's in pretty good with most of the residents over there.
There you go, my friend.
Oh, okay.
He knows.
I knew somehow that was coming this way.
What else?
That's, and,
Oh, my.
we started in the park today with a couple of drainage issues over there to get those wrapped up. We were out ditching last week, got some jobs caught up that we've
Yeah,
been sitting
you-
on for a few years. and,
Mr. Simpson showed me some of the work and they've been
Uh,
quite busy.
We got a few more, so we're gonna be bouncing back and forth between the park and on some of the other jobs and back, and
The jobs that he showed me today look really well done. I mean, the
So they're-
machine was a nice finished job, if you
Yeah.
will, and gives it a more professional look than to hack it up with a backhoe.
exactly.
Yeah, so, job well done there, or jobs, I should say. Okay, that's
And
it?
then- And then I spoke with Soil and Water about off-road drainage.
Yes.
And they said, Rich told me he would get back with me when he knows exactly everything that's going on with the off-road drainage.
Speaking of off-road drainage,
Oh,
we
that's-
did learn at the
Yes.
engineers meeting that Richard Regula indicated that they are no longer gonna be doing any off-road drainage. The county had been doing off-road drainage, and they found out they shouldn't be doing off-road drainage.
Legally.
Well, ditches they're responsible for,
Yeah, but he said
things that are actually categorized as a
They
ditch.
s- Yeah, they said in the meeting they couldn't use general fund, was it general fund money or something?
Yeah, the money they
to
were
do that?
using was a controversy, but there are some of that, I should say, was some of the ditches that, yeah, they are responsible, but it was where the money was coming from and allocating, so they're no longer gonna have that kind of funding.
The big push is everybody creating or joining a 6112 district, so that's
What
no
is that?
surprise to hear that that's the county's position.
What is that? Maybe I'm wrong, but I don't know what it is.
Creation of a regional water district.
Oh, regional.
And there's a reason why there's a push behind that, because it has its own separate funding mechanism. So it's to push money, or to save your existing pool of money, general fund, what have you, create another entity over here that can separately tax people to handle drainage. There are a number of counties involving a number of clients of mine that are all looking at either creating or joining and expanding districts.
So,
It's to capture money, and whether or not they'll actually go forward with the project, who knows?
so when their ditches are backing up and causing drainage problems on our roadways, or in our ditches, in our right of ways, what do we do at that point?
If it's an actual, remember, these words get confusing because common parlance, we think of a ditch as being just the thing along the road.
Yes.
But if it's an actual county ditch, it's a mandatory obligation of the Board of County Commissioners to maintain it. And that includes maintaining it so that it does not create a problem with your roads.
See, they said the prosecutor advised me not to use the general fund. I think that was an excuse. Excuse me.
I'm only offering the speculation for all of you to consider whether it has any merit. The push is to create these districts to have separate funding.
I think you're right.
That's what it is. And the fees on the separate funding can be enormous, whether they're calculated on a linear foot basis or if they're calculated on your square foot of impervious surface and
Yes.
roofing. It's a lot of money, it adds up.
Yes, it is.
They're doing
I
it up
talked
in
to them
Cuyahoga
about some of
Valley.
those, and they
Aren't
were
they
giving
doing
me
that up in
numbers.
Cleveland area? Right now, you paid a square foot.
Yep,
Moving this way, eh?
it is.
Not good.
That's how the funding for the stormwater is also, is off of the runoff, the,
Well, that is,
Pervious.
it's the extension of, for that stormwater purpose.
uh,
Because your stormwater, there are two levels essentially of your stormwater districts. One is for your large ponds, streams, ditches, actual county ditches, those types of things. And then there are your smaller collection structures. Your, what you would generally refer to as your storm drain.
interesting.
The only benefit if this goes through basically every county is, once and for all, there'll be a designation of who is responsible for the storm drainage. Because right now, everybody washes their hands of it, right? The developers that put it in, not our responsibility. Homeowners associations, it's not our responsibility. And of course, I come out here and preach it's not your responsibility, and it's not. So, these things just sit in the ground and deteriorate, clog up, create issues. Even the open areas, you know, that are part of the overall stormwater system
Is that
are
region,
subject to being blocked.
is that region already formed?
I'm not aware in Stark County of there being any 6112 district here.
But they would put a tax on
Correct.
to the townships, or do you mean to the individuals?
It'll be everybody that has property in the district.
More to come.
The code doesn't allow you to create a district, but it could ask, it authorizes you to ask the county commissioners to create a district.
Got any good news?
What's that?
You got any good news?
I do on Stevens when we get there.
Oh, okay, well,
I'm done.
well, I'm say we're gonna get to Frank then.
Thanks, Mike, I do not have anything to report this evening.
Well, then we'll get to Stevens then.
All right, the Stevens update. That's what we're gonna call this segment of the meetings from now on, at least for the next few months.
For the record, no relative, no.
No relative, even though the only obstacle in the case now is Michael Stevens. No relation.
Spelled different.
Correct, it is. So the other three parties involved all responded to my last letter and said that they would be willing to participate in the sale of this property. Frankly, even if it doesn't net them anything, if it just gets the obligation to do the cleanup off of their back. So there's one party that's an obstacle to that transaction, Michael Stevens. And I got plenty of, like, input or what have you, the family intrigue as to why there's this one person that has a problem with it. But if we were to take a practical look at this, in terms of costs, I think it'd be much easier and a lot less expensive for the township to go ahead and open an estate, force the parties to come forward and handle the property, or disclaim it, or get the court to order a partition so that it's sold and cleaned up.
Was that your recommendation?
It is my recommendation.
Can you explain that? Because I lost you a little bit, I'm sorry.
Yeah, well, we have, remember there are two parcels involved. I believe the one owner is Mary, right? Mary's completely cooperative, would love to sell the property today, and again, doesn't even care if she doesn't net anything out of it. The other property that was owned by Mary's daughter remains titled in that daughter's name. But there are 3 children who actually took the property by succession, just as a function of law. But because of the condition, I suspect it's because of the condition of the property, the children haven't stepped up, opened an estate, and actually done anything with it. So believe it or not, even though we aren't heirs to the property, anybody can open an estate for somebody. We, the township, can open an estate for the deceased daughter, make the 3 participants come into the case and either reach an agreement on the distribution of the property, or then file for the other 2 a request to partition the property, which will order its sale.
Now, if that process takes place and the property sells and there's money exchanged, who cleans the property up?
Well, it's my understanding that the prospective buyer is willing to clean up the property.
And then the sale of the property, since we opened up the estate and we, the township, incurred the expense of opening up an estate,
The
is there
expenses of administration will come out of the first loan.
of the sale?
Yep.
Okay,
Including
just so,
attorney's fees.
just so I'm finding out that we can recoup our investment if we get involved this way.
That's right.
That's a no-brainer.
I think it is. And I've thought about it quite a bit. I just don't see why we would go I know we have the pressure on them right now to go the route of cleanup. But as Frank has expressed on numerous occasions, we're looking at an expense, a considerable expense. And then recouping that, ultimately, you're gonna have to be in litigation anyway, right?
Sounds
Why
like it.
go there? And I tried to get across to the Stevens family members that they have an opportunity available to them that just isn't generally available. This is an entity that is willing to buy this property that's in the condition it's in, because they have a different interest. You know, they're interested not just as an ordinary market force. They own the property around it, so they want it. They should take advantage of that. And 3 of them are willing. There's the one obstacle, which we can clear up in the partition action.
How's that sound to you?
Sounds good.
I think Mr. Lockhart is eager to have this move along,
Does seem to be.
and he's not here. This is one decision I think we can make, and know we have his blessing. So I'll move that we pursue that avenue that you just mentioned, and have Mr. Matthews do the legal work to draw, it's called an estate,
Yeah, they'll actually open the estate
open the estate.
and then request the partition of the property.
I'll make that motion.
I'll second it.
Call roll.
Mr. Camp?
Yes.
Mr. Stevens?
Yes.
Is there a time frame on what?
Well, this is one that you wanted to get done this year, so that's why we're moving on it. So we'll move right on it and file it. Frank?
Just 2 questions. What would the strategy be if the party that's not willing to sell, what would the strategy be if we could convince that person to sell? Would it be the same, or would it be something easier?
Wouldn't be necessary. There you just need to run title and do a purchase agreement.
Okay, so
So if between now and the filing of an estate, you can get Michael on board.
well, that's what I'm getting at. Do you have a feeling that, because when I talked to Mrs. Michael, for going back 2 years. He was on board, and I'm wondering why now. I don't want to get into it, but I mean, you see what I'm saying? If that would make it easier, I could probably at least find out why, if there's something in there that we don't know about, but if that would make it easier, because that's shocking to me that he's not willing to do it. In fact, when I was talking to them, it was the opposite. He was the only one that was on board. But the second question, just for the language, so we would open up, the township would open up the estate. We would force.
And quite frankly, it needs to be done anyway.
Okay.
And I'm really, I won't say annoyed. Yeah, I'm annoyed. I'm annoyed that the county treasurer or county auditor hasn't already done it. Okay?
Because of property
Yes,
taxes.
for their tax duplicate, the tax duplicate is not correct to continue to list a property in the name of a deceased person. But the county will not step up, and I think Frank even got some input that the county doesn't think there's any process or something, and it just remains in limbo forever. That's silly, and we all know that's not how real property can function. That property transferred to those 3 surviving children as a function of law, right on the day of death. That's the way the law works. And that's because knowing who owns real estate is so crucial to our real estate structure.
And
It's
the
just a
treasurer,
formality to file the probate action, to have a court say that's what happened. So it needs to be done.
okay, and just for the language, so once the property is, the 3 people are forced into, is that the way is it into the estate action? Is that how it's?
Yeah, they're compelled to
Compelled,
respond.
okay, to
Now, they
compel
could
to respond.
always disclaim.
Okay.
You're not forced to take something in an estate. If anybody wants to come to the probate court and say, I hereby disclaim any interest in what have you, file that document, that's great, that serves our purpose. Otherwise, we know we have at least a majority of the heirs who want the property sold.
Okay,
And the recalcitrant heir cannot force the other 2 to remain involved in the property. So the court will order the partition and have it sold.
okay, so that, I think you just answered my question, so that if they do not come to the probate and they do not respond, I guess is the word. If they fail to respond, then what is it that we do?
Well, that would be a default if they failed to respond at all.
Okay, and
I'm not
what do we do?
anticipating that from at least the 2.
So what do we do if it's a default? Because that's what,
It's just a default judgment. They lose their interest by way of a piece of paper.
they lose their interest and then we go to court, we go to probate court and ask the
Sell it.
court to sell it, to give us
Sell it.
permission.
Yeah.
Well, they're not gonna give us permission to sell it.
Oh, yeah, I'm gonna ask. We have standing
Okay.
because we are directly impacted by the failure of people to step up and
Okay.
file an estate. This property, I mean, I've heard about it long enough now,
Okay,
and this property can't just sit in limbo where nobody cleans it up and everybody's afraid to deal with it because they just, well, they want it, it's their mom's property, but they don't want it. All those days are gone. We're tired of talking about them. Somebody needs to step up and follow a procedure to get this thing back on track. The property needs to be recognized for who the owners are. You can disclaim if you want, that's great. If you don't, I mean, the very worst case scenario is the probate court's gonna distribute the property in 3 distributive shares to the 3. And that's going to tell them they're legally responsible for the condition of it. I suspect when they hear that, we may have a disclaimer or 2. And as long as it's the right parties disclaiming, we know the parties that want to sell it, take care of the sale, run it all through the probate court, and get this problem behind you. There's a reason for pushing on it relatively quickly at this point too. It's actually an extremely beneficial position for the township to have somebody interested in buying it and cleaning it up. And that doesn't happen very often from your perspective either.
That have the finances to do it.
Exactly, have the finances to do it.
Yeah, that's the big thing.
Okay,
So good, I'm authorized to proceed with it, and that's the way we'll do it. Although, Frank, let's you and I keep in touch in case you hear differently from Mike.
Yep.
Great,
thanks. Other
Very
items,
good.
sir?
that's it, thank you.
Public speaks?
Sean, that's what I'm
Lazarus. Do you want me to stand over there?
Sure.
All
That
right.
way everybody can see your face, read your expression.
All right. So,
You know, you have Sean's address?
Yes.
Okay.
okay, so, on March 12th, I submitted a letter to this board, Mr. Sims. I was, just curious on what your thoughts were on the letter, and maybe a response. We've talked privately, but not to everybody, so.
Yeah. Do you have any comments on the letter, Liz?
The only thing I'd say, did you do any of the testing we
No.
talked about?
Not yet.
That was my only, compared to what you said in the letter, I think you really need to do the testing to prove your point as far as the chemicals and that might be there.
Okay.
Since I've talked to you, I talked to the health department, Paul DePasquale. I don't know if you've gotten a chance to call him. He called the EPA, and I write that down, this notebook is the last one. Two notebooks, and I might have grabbed the wrong one. Yeah, I think my notes are in the other notebook, Sean. But he indicated that the fellow from the EPA, of course, I already knew this from talking to you when Mr. Sims and I were up, had talked, they had met with you, and you had gone over some things, and talked about some things. And he mentioned that the injection process, to his understanding, actually limits the runoff possibilities versus just throwing fertilizer on fields. He said that reduces it down quite a bit. I emphasized to him that your concern, at least what I picked up, they are doing some testing on this product, but your concern is what they're not tested for.
That's correct.
And he really didn't have a sense for that, other than, well, the items that they are testing for at this point come out, I guess his wording was, if I recollect, this was a couple of days ago, I spoke with him, it's passing the EPA standards. But have you been able to, or have you talked to the health department? Because he kept referring me to the EPA, which I believe you've already talked to them.
Correct.
And I told him, I said, you know, the gentleman has this pond, and young kids are going to be swimming in it and using it. And had you had an opportunity to talk to Roar at all, or have you?
I have.
And you care to share how that's come out so far, or
Well,
where you're at with that?
I guess I haven't heard a direct answer to my questions. I mean, I've gotten questions back. Have you tested the water, me, from Lester? And have I talked to the EPA? Yes, you already knew that. Have I talked to the Roars? So that's fair. I mean, I'll address that. I just wanted to give you an opportunity to respond to the letter.
Yeah, and I don't have your letter with me. I had highlighted, but I don't remember what comments I put on it, Sean.
Okay.
Jim, you were here the last time
Right.
we had
I
spoken.
recall the problem.
Yeah, did you get a copy of his letter?
I didn't, but
It probably would have
just
been
in
helpful.
particular, what are you looking at the township doing? I know it has to do with the roadside ditch that's between the properties and having drainage from the Roar farm going to the ditch and then onto your.
That's correct. Yep.
Did you go out there then?
Yeah, I've been out several times.
Yeah, because that's what I thought the last time. You
Mike and I
met
went
with
out.
Jim about,
Mike and I went out and met with him.
what did you guys make out about the culvert or something?
Well,
We're not, I'm not doing anything until we find out what's going on with the drive culverts and ditches.
Okay, I didn't know.
Yeah, no, we're not.
That's the last I heard, and
Yeah.
I hadn't heard anything since then.
But,
Are you aware of anything that's going into your roadside ditch?
No.
Contaminant?
No,
so on?
and that's, I don't know, put a guy's in it and, I don't know, you know, it's.
There is a process to, you could stop that if in fact you were aware of that happening. If there was excess water or if there was contaminated water reaching your ditch, you could eliminate that, or you could order that eliminated. But I
And
guess
I- and-
we're
and-
kind of back to the same situation. We don't know that there's actually anything.
Yeah,
going on.
yeah,
how would you make that determination?
You'd have to test it or have a reason to test it. The classic situation that you would encounter would be the failure of somebody's septic system. You know, the newer or the modern systems, other than the mound systems, tend to actually be connected to roadside ditches, drainage. And you can tell when they fail. Typically, you'll get an odor first, and then you'll see a change in the water.
yes.
So if you had that type of awareness, you could, aside from the health department taking control of making sure they correct their septic system, you could stop the contamination into the ditch. So if you knew there was somebody contaminating your ditch, you could order that to stop.
Well, the health department will usually go out at that point.
I know on septics.
Yeah.
When you got an awful lot discharge,
That's
Yeah,
what
they'll
I-
have
and they're not running the aerator or
They'll have to
whatever,
deal
it's
with their
black
system.
and it's smelling.
Yeah,
Right.
I've called the health department before, they've come out.
yeah.
Right. But even if the health department, for whatever reason, were to say to you, we've got so many of them, we're not gonna deal with that one, you could order it to stop, because you can control the water that's entering your ditch. Now, having that authority is only half the question, or half the inquiry, right? Because what would you order them to stop doing? Right now, you're not aware of anything that's a contaminant or.
Because nothing's been tested, you don't know what
Yeah.
anything is.
And it's not an increase in quantity or anything like that, excessive or otherwise?
I don't think the runoff's any more than it normally is.
Okay.
I mean,
It could be debated.
okay. I don't live there, so.
Well, Jim, Sean's presented us with, and again, I don't have my letter with me here, I thought I brought all that file.
I can refresh your memory if you'd like.
Yeah,
The key
yeah.
point. So the reason I'm here today is because this board had asked me to report back on the findings. Fortunately, we were able to have the EPA out on Thursday, the 14th. But just as a summary, before that, on the 12th, I submitted a letter to the township, and in summary, the main point of the letter was, I wanted to make it clear that my wife and I do not approve of any drainage pipe being installed into any area of our property, which would increase the flow of pooling water from the farm field marked notice, Ohio EPA authorized Class B biosolids beneficial use site, trespassing is prohibited. We see the increase of the flow of rainwater pooling in this field onto our property as a public safety issue and potentially dangerous. Mr. Sims had informed me that this pipe would be installed within 4 weeks of when I had spoke to him. I'd referenced that in another place in the letter, that time frame. Again, we do not approve of this unless Lawrence Township can prove that this runoff does not have any heavy metals, triclosan, pharmaceutical residues, asbestos, arsenic, increased dioxin, polychlorinated bipheноls, hormones, flame retardants, or any other household chemicals. Once this is proven to not include these elements, then we would reconsider our stance after having time, 90 days, that could be negotiable, to review, and a time up to 24 months to retest if we feel necessary based on the results provided. So that was the statement that I had submitted. It's just kind of ironic, I mean, I am a little bit upset, to be honest with you guys. I told you I'd be here.
Yeah.
I was pretty nice last time, right, Frank?
I talked to you
Yes.
here with Frank.
Well, I mean,
We talked about this, Sean.
okay, that's fine.
We did.
That's fine. It's just funny to spend all this time on a lot of other things and,
Well, we're back to the same point, just to jump to the ultimate question here. What do you want the township to do? And I know that's a frequent thing that people struggle with, because you obviously have a predicament. They have all recognized that you have a predicament. I have recognized that you have a predicament. But this is a township board. It can't step over the toes of the EPA and regulate anything that's been authorized by the EPA. Because under our structure, the EPA rules preempt your local control over things. And I understand it from my inquiry of the road superintendent that there isn't anything he's aware of that is a contaminant in your roadside ditch, correct?
Yes.
Okay, so with just that kind of bare bones, basic understanding, what do you want the township to do? And then we can answer whether or not the township can even do that.
okay. So the first thing I asked them not to do was not to put a culvert in, which
Okay.
impacts the public safety. Because there's runoff onto the road, it also impacts the road just a bunch of different ways.
Okay, so there's a culvert that needs replaced? or
Yes.
what? And the culvert services what, a driveway?
Yes.
Okay,
And that driveway is on my property.
okay,
The runoff in the field is pooling on their property,
got it, yeah.
coming out.
Freezing on the roadway, going around the drive and then back in the ditch.
I had a conversation with Sims as to, could we redirect the water and take it anyplace else?
There's really no other place, I mean, unless
That
you
was
dig
one thing him and I did
20
talk
foot deep
about.
through that hill, you know, but,
And,
Well, the runoff is from the neighboring farm?
yeah,
but there's another pipe that runs under the road right into your pond.
Correct.
And, I mean, you're getting more off of that area than the
Well,
other area over there.
You can say that, but if you look at the topography of that, there's nothing coming in there.
Okay.
I mean, it's just a high area, so I'm not too concerned about it. Plus, they didn't apply the biosolids to that field in that area.
I thought that's where the marker was on the other side
Well,
of the
they were
street.
gonna, there's more to the story here, but we're just trying to get right to the,
But
So
from
the
what
rest
I
is-
talked to you, you want us to pay for the, testing.
well, what I'm
That's
saying
what
is,
That's what I think you want.
The
Am I
town-
wrong?
the township, that's what I wrote in your letter.
yeah.
Yes.
Right. Well, I mean, that's
So-
what we talked about.
So the reason for that stance that I have is because we have an issue with runoff that the township needs to deal with the ditch and the road.
The township's duty is to protect the road from damage if it's being constantly bombarded with runoff. That's exactly right.
And my stance is, do not touch that area until you can prove to me that this stuff isn't contaminated. And your stance and your statement to me was, you don't know, Mr. Sims doesn't know, actually, nobody in this room knows about that, if it's contaminated or not.
That's right. Nobody knows.
So what I'm saying is, before anybody does any digging, that the township tests the soil, the water, whatever they need to do at that point to identify whether or not there is a contaminated soil there.
Does your MS4 permit authorize you to collect fees and require people to identify any water quality issues?
I don't think we are allowed to.
Is yours a public improvement or a public notification, MS4 only?
Mm. Yeah,
I had to ask Rick, it was just.
Rich,
yeah,
yeah.
soil and water we just met with, I can't answer that.
You don't really have a process of people applying for permits or anything when they're disturbing property?
Like more than an acre of ground,
Yeah.
they go through Stark Soil and Water.
So
They get their permitting through them.
It doesn't give you that authority.
So I think I have another solution, possibly, if you're not done.
Oh, no, go right ahead.
So anyway, just to continue on with my general thought. After the last township meeting, this board requested that I keep you informed with any updates that I found. and the board and its legal counsel suggested that I pay to have the testing done to my pond and to my well, to create some kind of baseline. Thank you for the recommendations, seriously, thank you. However, I have expressed numerous times that I don't wanna know what's in this stuff, honestly. I don't wanna know.
Do you have children? Do you have children? Just answer yes or no.
Yes, sir.
I'd wanna know if I had children
Okay.
for sure.
Well, I'll
I'm
explain
sorry.
I'll explain why I don't wanna know.
I know you told me why you don't wanna know, but I'm saying if I had kids, I'd wanna know.
I don't wanna know because my conscience isn't gonna let me just make this a singular issue. Okay? That's why. It's not gonna be just me and my family.
I lost you there, but go ahead. I understand.
Okay? You lost me there? I will not be able to make this a singular issue. It doesn't just impact me and my family. There are people downriver, downstream. If it's in my pond, it's elsewhere.
Oh, I'm sure.
Okay?
Right.
So I won't be able to be quiet.
That's good.
Okay, that's all. That's all I'm trying to just establish. I don't wanna know, cause I don't wanna go through this. I don't wanna do this. I would feel responsible personally. Okay, so, if there is a problem at my house, then there are problems in other areas across the township, across the county, and across the state, and across the country. My conscience isn't gonna let me deal with that just singularly, okay? There are other individuals who have used science, testing, and common sense to bring awareness to these issues and the use of biosolids on farmlands for nearly 30 years now. And due to the work of David Lewis, Richard Honor, Carolyn Snyder, PhD, Dr. Edward Group, Samuel Shepard, Sayer Jai, Lydia Epp, Richard, I already said Richard Honor. So, on March 14th, I met with 2 representatives from the EPA to review the permitted Class B biosolids application near my home. And it was my understanding from what I have read and what I have been told by the EPA that Quasnar, the applicator, actually followed the regulations set forth and they actually exceeded the requirements set forth by the EPA. There are 3 ways that I'm aware of that they did this. They followed the setback requirements from a waterway, which is 33 feet. They follow the setback requirements from another property, which is 100 feet. They also are required at a 15% grade to do an injection application. There is no 15% grade. They inject it on the field. They could do, as you had mentioned 20 years ago that you had a problem, they could do topical application. Okay?
That'd be bad.
So, I also learned that the EPA is reviewing at this time the toxic compounds that have been found in biosolids, potentially, and between studies have shown 80 to 90,000 contaminants are known to be found, according to the EPA's own investigation, found in the Targeted National Sewage Sludge Survey Statistical Analysis Report in 2009. Okay? Okay.
That sounds important, but it probably isn't.
Great.
There's probably all sorts of contaminants that we're breathing right now, because there's nothing, there's no purity, there's no absolute clarity. You're exposed to parts per billion of all sorts of different things throughout a day, depending upon where you venture. The problem with your scenario is only exceeding certain fixed limits present a problem.
Understood.
Now, I don't understand why the EPA isn't responsive to you. It's not this board that regulates that use. It's the EPA that regulates that use. I don't know what their testing process is. I don't know what their verification of compliance with a permit is. There has to be some mechanism. And I would think it would be triggered by a complaint of a neighboring property owner raising some concern about the contaminant. Now, maybe the EPA is waiting for something to go on that's more than that. A test result that shows a contaminant that's not permitted, or a test result that shows a level of a contaminant that exceeds the scope of the permit. The EPA is a very technical-driven operation, and it probably wants more information, like some test that shows a parts per million or parts per billion of something that exceeds a parameter, and then they would come in and test it.
The problem here is there's no known way of removing most of these 80 to 90,000 contaminants, and some of them are ending up in drinking water.
There's no question. Don't get me started on drinking water. Drinking water out of an ordinary tap has all sorts of contaminants in it. It just does. It doesn't mean they're harmful levels, it just means you're getting some exposure to it.
The consensus seems to be that the use of toxic sludge on farmland is beneficial to agricultural production rates. However, even the EPA cannot guarantee its safe use. They do use risk factors to manage the real health risks that come with the use of toxic sludge or biosolids. Risks that would line up with the likelihood of getting bit by a shark or getting struck by lightning. However, these risks are not only in correlation to the contaminants that the EPA can monitor, limit, and mitigate from its sewage sludge, meaning the 80 to 90,000 contaminants that they label contaminants in their sludge. They cannot do anything about that. Therefore, there's no way to measure, they don't even measure it. That's the point. But they can be tested and found.
And these are all great points that if you were advocating today in front of a subcommittee of the House or the subcommittee of the Senate in Ohio, that would all make sense for you to be doing. But these are all regulations that are already in place, and obviously this company already has a permit to be applying what it's applying.
Okay.
So we need to try and find an avenue for you to get some results so that you have a peace of mind that what is being applied out there is in compliance with the permit and isn't exposing you to some contaminant level that the state believes is excessive. If there are separate things that aren't regulated that you perceive or otherwise recognize as being a contaminant, you would have a right to bring a personal claim for a private nuisance against the neighboring property owner. But that's not the remedy that you're looking for. Now,
Actually, the course of action that I was looking to take was actually based off of your advice, which was to regain township control of that property. But
the township doesn't have control of that property. And I don't know that it ever controlled the property. The township controls a very narrow issue, and that is handling runoff that may be affecting its township road.
correct.
That's it.
Got it. Okay.
Well, how about, and Mr. Camp has another meeting
Is
scheduled.
the
after
ditch,
this.
by the way, is the pipe that is
What-
bringing us here,
what I-
is
Well,
that
before-
increasing
What
flow?
I'm proposing with Mr. Sims is he's gonna go out there and do some grade shots
Okay,
and see, and Sean's, main concern is the runoff into his pond. If there's any way we can redirect it, we need to do that.
I would eliminate that source.
Yeah, and I mean, that was the heart and soul of. So. we
Well, I think you're picking up on my real concern here is that, it was just interesting that the last time I stood here, there was some misnomers. One thing was I said that the field was improperly marked in my letter. That was actually a misstatement. They are required to post for citizens listening to this, okay? People in this room, they're required to post a sign 1 week prior to the application and leave it up for 30 days after the application. The reason that sign stayed in there is because they were gonna continue to apply on that entire side of the field. Okay, so second, we all speculated at the last board meeting that we were unaware of any type of use of this biosolids in our community. In fact, we even thought that it might be the first one in the county.
I agree, I didn't know.
Okay, so there's 61 permitted fields in our township. There are 300 permitted fields in the county, and this started in the 1990s. So it's been going on for a long time, probably since you first dealt with it, Mr. Stevens. So third, I have provided a map. This is on the second page writing, about the middle of the page. Sorry, I didn't bring one for you. I provided a map with permitted fields. So if you look at this map, figure 3, these are all the permitted fields in Lawrence Township. Now, this is not in color. I'll be happy to email this to you guys, but limited time.
Where are you looking here?
Figure 3, flip it, it's a picture right here.
Gotcha.
The dots, the highlighted areas, they're not showing up very well. And there's a reference here on the Ohio EPA website, okay? So you can see that. There's a map of ambient groundwater that was also provided by the EPA, which I found to be interesting. Figure 2. So this shows our area with groundwater, and you said that was a big topic on your end. And this shows basically it's really close to the boundaries of our township. And I actually zoomed in on figure 1 to where that aquifer is. It's interesting, it's immediately under the fields that I'm referencing. Just coincidentally, just happens to be there. I just thought that was interesting. And if you go to figure 4, it'll show the fields, and if you kind of look at those side by side, which I've stapled them so you can't do that, but if you look at them side by side, you can see that I'm not telling a lie. That's the truth. The aquifer is directly underneath this. So, I did meet with the farmers, and they own and operate this farm, and they agreed not to apply the Class B biosolids anymore near my home. I found this to be a nice gesture. However, I found that last week there was a bright, peculiar green, gosh, I can't say that word. Anyway, there's bright green algae bloom in my pond. It's March. So, haven't done any testing yet. The conclusion, the last boarding meeting, we listened to an arborist and First Energy suggest how to maintain the trees. We listened to that today a little bit. We approved the sale and purchase of dump trucks, equipment, for the fire department, and we discussed the removal of trash from the Stevens property again today. It's great. I mean, you guys are working. I appreciate it. But as a lifelong resident of this community, I and many of my neighbors and friends are concerned about the use of biosolids on the farmland near our homes. And many have agreed with me in saying that they would rather live next to the Stevens property and look at trash than to have God knows what injected into the ground and perking up through the ground and running off into not just my pond, but everywhere else.
Did the EPA, when you talked to them, was they gonna come test your pond or anything?
They are not gonna test anything because they're by the book. And by the book, they already have, I already told you, according to their procedures, they have followed the rules, with the exception of one, but I think that one's interpretive. And all they would do is set back farther,
So
the
they
next
don't-
application.
They don't do the testing then? Even with your complaint, they won't do the testing?
There's nothing to test. If they don't see black sludge gushing out and running down a stream, they won't do anything.
That's That's hard, you know, I really suggest you get it tested on. I really do, and that might be the start of this whole thing going the other way,
Understood.
you know what I'm saying?
Well, in a sense, I understand the long-term ramifications of the, as at this point, suspicions and allegations that I have,
That's,
and how that could impact our community in multiple ways. So it is with it's great sincerity that I'm requesting that you do not let me test this stuff.
oh, it's up to you to test it. but I
Well,
mean,
I'm
just
saying, you keep putting it back on me, you put it back, hey, do it, it's your property, it's your responsibility. Well, actually, you know, this water's running off, it's pooling up, it's coming out, I didn't put the stuff on the field. The EPA, according to their standards, which does not include the 80 to 90,000 known contaminants in this biosludge. And, you know, the legal, again, by the book response is, you know, doesn't really matter until you can prove something. And my stance to Mr. Stevens is, and anybody else who I talk to, Mr. Sims, is my belief is, and this is what the problem is, I believe it's in there. I know it's in there. I just have to prove it. That's it.
That's
It's,
the whole thing.
it's just simple. It's a really simple,
Yeah.
it's a simple thing, and I'm saying, do you want to go down that road over a culvert? And obviously, I'm already on the road, so I'm going. Let me get to my conclusion, unless you.
Well, I was just gonna say, I've asked you, what do you want the township board to do? And if I understand what you want this township board to do, it's to not install a culvert that redirects any more water toward your property from the neighboring property. And if I understood the road superintendent and the chair, they're going to have the road superintendent check elevations and see if water can be routed a different direction, correct?
Yeah.
But he's already determined that that can't happen.
Well, he's willing to
We'll go look at it and see, but yeah, I mean, you're.
Water won't flow uphill,
No, it doesn't, and there's a big.
but we're gonna take a look at the situation.
Well, the only other,
shoot it.
from all I've heard, and I think that we ought to get to a conclusion here, so that you don't come back to the next township meeting and be frustrated with there being lack of clarity or direction or something being done. The township's authority, if in fact there's water being diverted onto the township road, would be to force it onto the property owner to fix it. If you wanted to go to that extreme and go through that procedure. People are not permitted to route water onto your roads, if you don't want it to happen.
That's just the natural lay of the land.
I don't
is where-
care.
No, I'm just saying, that's where
I
the
don't
water runs, and the culvert's probably been there
And that's
years ago and
That's a
everything.
problem, it's a problem for the landowner if you wanna push it there, okay?
And I guess what I'm trying to do, believing what I believe, is that I already know it's a problem, but when we prove it, what are we doing, you know, in the meantime?
Well, you're just not gonna like these answers, and that's okay, but I'm one who always believes in just being a straight shooter with you. No grandstanding, no games. We're not gonna pretend that this township board can solve your problem, because it can't. And if it tried, all it would be doing is pretending or grandstanding. Oh, I feel your pain and I'm gonna do. They're a township board and they have limited authority. They can't order the EPA to do anything. They can't order the application of the material to stop, because they just don't have authority to do any of that. So they have this very narrow window of opportunity to try and deal with your very peculiar problem and try to lessen the amount of water that's being diverted from the neighbor's property. And that's what they're willing to try to do. But all these other issues about what's in the material or effluent, you know, whether it's a category of thing that's outside the EPA's reg, all of that stuff is not something the township has any authority over. And even if you were to test it and find out about it, what would you do with it? What would you as a township board do with it?
That's the point.
They couldn't order anything.
Yeah, well, actually, according to your words, if we found that it was a nuisance and a health concern,
Yeah, if it's a nuisance, that's right.
the EPA would then lose the ability to permit
Well,
this stuff. That's what I misunderstood then, so maybe you can,
Well,
you
no.
can restate that.
If I ever said that if this is a nuisance, somehow it overrules the EPA, then I misspoke, and I don't think I would have ever said that.
Oh,
If it qualifies as a nuisance, then it triggers nuisance authority. I can tell you, though, that from a health standpoint, that nuisance case would probably be one that would have to be handled through the prosecutor's office. Because under those particular codes, they're not handled as nuisances that we deal with. Those are nuisances where the statute specifically requires the case be filed by the county prosecutor. But we're back to this issue. Speculation, conjecture, fear, anxiety about what's in the effluent is not gonna be enough. And I don't know that the township, I don't speak for the township, but I try to advise them on things. I don't know if they wanna go down the road of testing private property issues for contaminants, because I would fear that you're gonna never stop doing that. And if you had a probable cause, if you had a reason to do it, you know, if you saw the proverbial green slime running in your ditch or something, maybe it'd be a different story, but I'm not hearing that that's occurring. So I can tell you're frustrated, I think the board's frustrated, we're all frustrated, and we're trying to get over the frustration. Your solution to your problem is not gonna rest with Lawrence Township, it's just not. And if you came here to hear something different, that's too bad. You need to deal with the authority that actually regulates this particular use. You need to try and contact your state legislators, who I'm sure every time campaign season comes around, they're very pro-people and trying to make sure they, you know, provide a constituent service, right? Well, now would be the time for them to step up and and do a constituent service for you, interacting with the EPA. But I just don't, I think that we're so off the mark that this board just doesn't have the authority to regulate or cure your situation.
And the reason that I'm off my mark is the presumption that I had when you said if I tested, if I understood you correctly,
Yeah,
if I tested the water and I found that these things were in my pond or in the soil,
Yep.
if I could prove that before or in my well.
We'd have a different day, wouldn't we? We'd have a different scenario.
Okay, well, I was under the understanding that if I could prove that those things were in, let's just say my pond, in the sediment, okay?
Let's at least not completely speculate. Let's pick a thing that we're talking about. What's a contaminant that you would be looking for? Lead?
Let's say Benadryl.
Yeah, the likelihood of finding Benadryl in that.
So when I come back here,
The
6 months,
the
and I
solution-
look you in the eye and find Benadryl in there,
I would be fascinated by it.
all right.
So you could find a report and you could fascinate me, but I'm telling you,
What is the ultimate
the rate
authority, if we found Benadryl and I could prove that it wasn't in there before?
the rate that those things oxidize and the dilution that you're going to encounter as they go through the process of being washed through streams and washed into public sewers and mixed with all sorts of other things, the likelihood of finding Benadryl as a particular substance has to be so far removed that I think you should realistically look at things that are more likely.
Okay, that's fine.
A lead,
I just picked one thing.
yeah. So let's
Because
for our,
Benadryl would
let's
be
for our discussion.
So far out there.
It would be.
Mhm.
You have to realize that a lot of these things oxidize in the systems when they're exposed to air and water. They're just not going to exist for very long down the path, reaching a farm.
How about a
field.
blood thinner? What if we found a blood thinner in there?
Again, those are all substances, pharmaceuticals that oxidize. There's a reason why those things are thrown out after a period of time, because the effective ingredients are lost, and basically what you're left with is just a carrier, the thing that the substance is actually put in to carry it as a pill.
Are you aware of a product called mill organite?
No.
They sell it in Lowe's and Green and Alliance.
Okay?
It's a fertilizer. It's from Milwaukee. It's the toxic waste, same stuff being spread here, but this is from Barton and Lime Lakes. That's from Milwaukee.
Okay, well,
These have been tested.
let's finish our.
These items are in the testing, it's been bagged and processed and whatever, so.
Let's finish our thought. Let's just
Okay.
pick a standard category of a contaminant, lead. You test your water and you find that there is a parts per million level of lead that far exceeds anything that would be naturally expected there. Your next element would be the causation. What's the source of the excess lead that's in my pump? We'll start with the presumption that it's the neighboring property. If that happens, are you telling me that that's not a condition that will violate the terms of the permit for the application?
Yes, it would.
And then what would happen?
Well, isn't that the answer to the question we're struggling with?
Well, what?
I would think that the EPA, when presented with actual information that triggers their authority to enforce their permit, isn't going to sit idly by and do nothing, and just let somebody run with a situation in violation of their permit.
Are you
I can
familiar-
tell you from client experience, that's not my typical experience with the EPA. The EPA is usually looking for things like that and come down pretty hard.
Well,
But apparently they're not willing to just speculate.
I mean, I would just personally request that you look into what I'm talking about. That's part of the reason I'm here, is an awareness. Because if you understood.
The board is
You remember
aware.
when the Cuyahoga River caught on fire?
Well, I'm aware of far more about that than you would think I would be.
Yeah.
And I know that's a common parlance we all talk about. Just how goofy is that, a river caught on fire? Of course, we all know the river didn't catch on fire. The river was coated with contaminants from neighboring industrial uses, and those materials caught on fire. Okay, and that's not splitting hairs, that's a technical reality. The river didn't catch on fire.
The
The
contaminants.
book on top of it caught on fire, and it made public news.
Do you remember what happened with the contaminants that they're supposed to, now what they're supposed to do? Because the way to deal with that type of pollution was to put it in streams.
Believe it or not, the way to deal with pollution today is to put it in streams. There are all sorts of permits issued every day for companies to put certain levels of contaminants in our waterways. It's just been regulated at a point where the public authorities believe those levels aren't harmful to people or to the environment or to animals and wildlife. Contaminants aren't all self-contained into some magic thing where we're all protected from. They're discharged into our atmosphere all the time. There are smokestacks all around, right? Those things are producing contaminants. They're just regulated at a parts per million level that the public authorities find acceptable. They're still out there, and they're much better than they were. Clean Water Act, Clean Air Act, administered by the local EPAs, are much better than things were in the sixties and seventies. I get all that. And I know you're struggling with this, and we could go on for the next 2 hours.
I'm not
and
struggling
you're,
with it.
well, you are.
No, I'm not. I'm just,
You
I
are.
might be-
I wouldn't want your predicament, so I understand.
I might be a little frustrated with your talking over me.
No,
But
I'm trying to be
That's
very,
not it.
very direct, because there's no point in just grandstanding with you and pretending that the board can do something that it can't. Doesn't mean they don't want to try to help you and find a way of helping you, but if you think the ultimate remedy is here, I just want you to understand it's not. The board's not gonna order that something stop, or the board's not gonna order that test be turns in. I mean, it's just a practical reality. Now, how do we solve the practical reality as a group of reasonable people?
Well, I apologize.
I would think that you would want to have this tested, and then if you have some evidence that there's an actual known situation developing, then the board can take your evidence and lobby on your behalf before the EPA, lobby on your behalf before other public authorities that have authority to try and do something with this.
Well, Mr. Matthews, maybe I lost focus again. My entire sole purpose for being here was to follow up on my letter and to do what this board had asked me to do, which was to give them a report on what I had found and what I had come to, which I believe I did that. And in response to you, I am trying to get to a conclusion. My ultimate desire would be for this board and the community to collectively join together to investigate the true impact of biosolids and to come to a mutual understanding of how to proceed after collecting some hard evidence, one way or another. And my request would be to put a motion at some point together to have a subcommittee to collaborate this type of effort. And that is a question. We have 61 sites in our township, sir. That's the problem, not my house. Again, it's not a singular issue. This impacts your family, and 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 you live and work here. This isn't just me. So,
What
The
you're
next
looking
one,
for
we
then
can-
is, you're looking for a committee to investigate this. Is this what you're saying?
I think it's warranted, yes.
You test the water and I'll join you. But you gotta test your water and prove to me that there's something there, and then I'll come and join you. How's that?
I can tell you, there's no authority in the code for a township trustees organization to
I won't
create
do
an
it as a
ad hoc
trustee,
committee.
I'll do it as just an
Yeah,
individual.
an ad hoc committee to try and investigate
Yeah.
something. So I really think we're off track on trying to give you direction that would really help you address your problem. But we've tried.
You've tried.
Yeah, I think I've tried.
Tried to,
I think I've tried to explain to you that as much as we want to spend time and time, this board just doesn't have the authority to help you. It doesn't mean they don't care. It doesn't mean they're not concerned. It's just that I know the way this group functions, and they'd rather be upfront with you than, leading you down the primrose path of, oh, well, we'll talk next time, or we'll discuss this, when there's ultimately nothing they're going to be able to do. Now, when we say that, there's a preface in all of it, right? And I'm hearing from Mr. Camp in particular, that if you came back with an actual
Yes.
water quality sampling that said there was some contaminant level that exceeds a level that's acceptable, and from a causation standpoint, you could rationally relate it to your neighbor's property, then I can guarantee you this board will lobby on your behalf.
Yes.
And they'll go to the EPA, and they'll communicate with the EPA and see about something being done.
Right.
That would be their proper recourse to do. It wouldn't be for them to step over the EPA and
No.
assume authority they don't have, but I'm sure they'd be willing to go to bat for you with the EPA.
I also think you should listen to your response to the last board meeting.
I'm
Just-
not gonna go back and listen to the other response. I think these conversations like this have a valuable purpose. They try to get us back onto the right page, so that we're all talking the same, okay? And there's no point in going round and around and around with what might have been said or something. We're giving you plain, blunt, clear instruction tonight on what this board can do and what it can't. And I don't see what's being missed. I really don't. This board would like to help you. It might be in a position to lobby for you and help you if it had some further evidence that there was actually a problem that they could address. Right?
Right.
Okay. And I've also heard, by the way, that Mr. Sims isn't installing a pipe right now, correct?
Correct.
So in fact, I think he's not gonna touch the scenario, right?
Right.
So you're not at risk of having a different pipe installed that might increase the amount of flow from the neighbor to your property. So that's been addressed. Those are all items within this board's authority.
Thank you.
Okay?
Thank you for clarifying. Appreciate it. Thank you for your time. Thank you for your service.
Any additional public speaks? Hearing none, any other information to be brought before the board? Hearing none, have a motion to adjourn?
So do it?
I'll second that. Call roll?
Mr. Stevens?
Yes.
Mr. Camp?
Yes.
Okay, Lester, are you meeting in here or in that room?
It doesn't make, we can go in there. It's okay with you guys.
Okay.
I'll go around with this petition. How many do you say I get? Dave, can you sign this? You live close enough?
Petition to, oh, no, I'm a little